How to change a blade traditionally, a lot of people know we have our blade change assistant and we have our blade hooks. But we're going to demonstrate the proper way to change a blade if you don't have those tools that we offer to our customers. And what we're going to show today is using a pump truck or a pallet jack. Now, some facilities might not have this, and if you don't, then what you're looking for is a 4x4 that you would utilize to put the blade on and then slide it underneath the machine or back the machine up over the blade.
So the key thing here to also remember is safety. So we want to make sure we're wearing our gloves.
When you're changing a blade, you want to make sure that 2 people are on site during the blade change process. That's the first thing. The second thing is you want to make sure your machine is actually locked out, because if you're the one changing the blade and someone else doesn't see you and turns the machine on, that could cause a serious accident.
Serious accident.
Yeah.
There's a lot of facilities, smaller municipalities, where they do only have the one operator. Again, the same process will apply for one. It's just going to take them a little longer than when you have the ability of having 2 people.
Correct.
Again, you just have to be a little bit more cautious on how you handle the blade, and you want to make sure the guard is on the blade itself. So when you're doing the transfer, you have all that safety in place. But again, everything we're doing with 2 people, you can do with the one. You have to be a little bit more cognizant of your surroundings.
Yeah, that's taking an old blade off, putting a new blade on, and then setting your blade up, part 1 in the back room, setting pitch and height, and then on the ice, part 2, making sure you're cutting level and also setting your min cut. And the other thing I find, a lot of people don't do this, especially for part 2 on the ice, is making sure you have clean ice to work with. That allows you to see your actual setup of setting your min cut. It's a little bit more difficult when you're doing it on used or dirty ice.
Exactly. And ideally what you want to do before you change that blade, take the machine out on the ice, give it a good scrape, so that way you know you've got that clean sheet. So then when you do put that new blade on, it's going to make more sense when you're doing that drag and drop, or you're just doing your maintenance in general, because now you have something you can reference to.
Perfect.
And not a pile of snow already out there.
So before we actually put the blade underneath the machine, we want to take our safety guards off.
So you'll see at the front of the guards themselves, there's going to be these 2 little screws. At times they may be tightened, at times they may not be. And if you find that they are, just grab your screwdriver, back them off, and again, just slide out, pop them off.
For the middle grate, I recommend the left-hand side. So all you want to do is just lift up your flood pipe, and it comes out pretty easy. Then put your flood pipe back down.
People forget that this actually can move, but it is just that simple, up and then back down.
Right now, the blade holder would be at roughly a 10-degree pitch. We need to actually get the blade parallel to the ground, the blade holder itself and the blade. You want to have the back of the blade holder flush with the face of the front of the conditioner opening here. Your bottom part of the blade holder and your blade is that parallel to the ground. The other safety element that you want to make sure you're actually putting in place before you get involved in the blade change process and having the blade underneath, because you will be working underneath the conditioner, just grab yourself a 4x4 and just place it under the runner so that if for whatever reason your conditioner were to come down, you have that safety guard in there to protect you. Place it on top of the pump truck. All you want to do is actually tilt the scabbard up, let the blade slide out, and then you can put your scabbard away.
And this is important when you have 2 people on hand, because that way at least you have somebody and you don't trip yourself up and get caught on something.
Now, if you actually have a magnetic blade safety guard, that's when you're going to actually utilize that. We're ready to actually engage the blade underneath the conditioner. I think that's pretty close. So I'm just going to pump this up a bit. What we're going to do now is I'll attach number 1 hole position with the hex bolt. After I'm done, then Chris will attach number 10 hex bolt to the number 10 hole. You don't want to do it together at the same time. Make sure only one person's moving the blade at that time and not 2 people touching the blade from a safety standard. Just in case the blade were to move and somebody wasn't paying attention, that could cause some serious harm. So I'll do number 1 position first. And this blade is greater than 4 inches. So of course I'm going to be using the front holes, always coming from underneath and then up. Lock washer first, and then your nut. And at this point in time, all you want to do is finger tighten on both number 1 and number 10.
And we're good.
So now that we have number 1 and number 10 hex bolts in place, finger tightened, we can now remove the pump truck.
Now that we've got the 2 end bolts in, Marty, so for the rest of the bolts, what is the pattern we're looking for when we go to tighten these?
Certainly. So position 5 and 6 hex bolts, you want to tighten those first, and then you can go 4 to 1, and then 7 to 10. You definitely do not want to be going from one side all the way across to the other. And the reason for that, our actual blade holder is feathered up. The first 6 inches in is feathered up, tapered up a 1/16 of an inch. So you're actually, by tightening the middle hex bolts first, you're actually feathering the blade to the blade holder as it's supposed to be. If you were to actually do it from one end to the other, you could create gaps, which would affect the cutting of the machine and doing floods, creating ripply ice, wavy ice, correct?
Correct. The other thing to keep in mind too is, Marty, what's the pressure you should be using when you're tightening those bolts?
20-pound torque. We use lock washers.
Yeah.
Do not, and I can't stress enough, do not use a...
Impact wrench.
Yeah, don't use an impact gun, folks. Taking the hardware off and putting it back on. What you'll do is you'll cross-thread it, and that puts you in a totally different category of being messed up, having to bring out a cutter, a propane torch, heating up the hardware so that you can get it off. No impact gun, folks.
Nope. Nice thing is this conditioner's sitting on the ground. When it's shaving that ice, there is no room for those bolts to go anywhere. So again, if you're gonna over tighten, all you're gonna do is just add extra stress to that blade. You're gonna start creating too many issues with that ice. And you may not realize that extra torque is creating an issue that you're not even seeing.
Yeah, and the other part about that, because we do use lock washers, if the lock washer, which is considered to be one height above the other on the ends, but if they compress and they're actually flat against each other, the lock washer is no good anymore. So again, only 20-pound torque and no impact gun of any kind. Now we're gonna do part 1. This is where you're gonna actually set your blade up for pitch and height. We do have the decal on the inside of the conditioner, and anyone that's watching the video and that I've trained in Zamboni Boot Camp, I don't use the decal on the inside. I actually use the blade gauge tool because this is forged already at 10 degree. So it actually kind of saves a step. You can use the decal, but I utilize this tool. Now we're gonna do part 1 of the blade change process, setting your pitch and height. And you have to set your height on both left side and right side. They are independent of each other. Make sure you have proper cut resistant gloves on. I'm gonna place the blade gauge tool onto the blade. What I'm looking for is I want this blade gauge tool tight to the bottom of the runner. I don't want a gap at the back and I don't want a gap at the front. If I have a gap at the back, that's an indication I'm less than 10 degree pitch. If I have a gap at the front, that means I'm greater than 10 degree pitch. And before I even engage this onto the blade, I actually want to lower the height of the blade below the blade runner. So to lower your height adjustment, you're going to go counterclockwise. To raise it, you're going to go clockwise. So I just want to adjust this to counter, clockwise. I'll bring this below the runner, and now I'm going to engage the blade gauge onto the blade. So as you can see, right here, I have a gap at the back, and I don't have a gap at the front. I even have to come lower on my height adjustment. So right here where my thumb is, you can see the gap back here. I'm going to indicate probably we have about a 7 degree pitch, and we're looking for 10. I need to go clockwise to create 10 degree pitch, and I'll tell you when to stop. So folks, once this gap is even all the way across, stop, Chris. Now I have the gap even all the way across, which would indicate to me that I have 10 degree pitch. I'll go clockwise now, and I'm going to raise the blade up until the blade gauge tool is tight to the bottom of the runner. And as I'm getting closer with the blade gauge tool to the bottom of the runner, touching at the front, and I still have a gap at the back. Chris, can you give me once on the hand crank clockwise? And you can see the gap's even all the way across. And as I'm doing this, I'm just tightening it, sliding it across. I do not want to be tapping on the inside of the runner. I want the blade gauge tool flush to the bottom of the runner. And that is your end result right there. We're going to go over to the right side now. When I engage the blade gauge tool on the right side for the adjustment height, if I do have a gap at the front or back, even though Chris has already created the 10 degree pitch on the left-hand side, but I do have a gap at the front or back, that's an indication of a couple things. First of all, the blade could be bent. The other thing that could be the issue is the blade holder could be bent. How's that caused? That's usually caused by somebody coming off the ice and not raising their conditioner quick enough and actually hitting the runners into the threshold, and that can bend the blade holder. Make sure you stop, raise your conditioner after you shut your augers off, and then drive off. Don't be driving off and raising at the same time. Here on the right, I want to be below the runner. So I'm going counterclockwise to lower it, and I'm sliding it across. I'm still tapping. Perfect. And you can see I don't have the gap at the front or the back, which means my blade holder and my blade, there's no bend or any damage done to that. And I've created 10 degree pitch. So after we've set pitch and height, Now we're gonna go counterclockwise, Chris, on the hand crank, roughly 4 or 5 times so that we can go out and do part 2 on the ice.
Once you're comfortable, just as you mentioned, you want to make sure that everything is around you is clear and free. Hop on your machine, back out onto the ice, and take it to the next stage.
Perfect. So now we've done part 2 on the ice, setting our min cut. And how do we communicate amongst each operator where our min cut is set at based on the handle on the hand crank? Looking at it topographically, I've set the min cut and I'm actually at 6 o'clock. Now, how do I communicate that with my fellow colleagues that are coming on shift after me? If I come in on shift after the person that set the blade and it's at 9 o'clock and it should be at 6, how do I know that? It should be at 6. Well, you can easily drop the conditioner when you go out for your first flood on shift. Look behind you and make sure you have, depending on your model, 400 series, a 10-inch gap inside the runners, or for a 500 series or 650 model, you want an 8-inch gap. The last thing you want to do is be too aggressive on your min cuts for a 400 series model, because if you are, you might have to do that dump of shame and come back out and finish your flood. I'm going to show you how to communicate this amongst the operators within your facility. So I recommend using whiteboard. So what I would do with the whiteboard, I put the date of the blade change, my name, and also to understand whether you're using the front holes or the back holes, you want to take a measurement of that blade, so you do use the right holes. I would put the width of the blade that I put on and how wide it is. That was 4.5. Now what I'm going to do, as you saw, the handle of the hand crank was at 6 o'clock. I'm going to draw a black circle and I'm going to put a red dot at 6 o'clock. Think of it as a clock. Chris, I just did the blade change. You're coming on shift for the afternoon shift. You come in and you walk by the whiteboard in our operator room and you see that the handle is supposed to be at 6. You get to the machine and it's at 12. So you know now, before you actually engage everything on the ice to do your first flood, you actually do have to drop the conditioner, and you might have to go clockwise to get to 6 o'clock or counterclockwise to get to 6 o'clock to get that look again. Runners, gaps, milky look in the middle. This is a tool that allows you to understand where's my min cut at and where's my handle at, so that everyone's on the same page.